How do we keep the planet moving towards a greener future? It doesn't happen without driven entrepreneurs and inspired social impact leaders like you. This podcast will give the tools and insight you need to join the sustainability movement and save the world. This is Thinking Green with Mohammed Abdallah.
Welcome back, Thinking Green Nation. I'm joined today by my good friend, colleague, hermano, un abrazo muy grande, People Reiser, Philip Reiser out of Peru. How you doing this afternoon, Philip?
Good. It's good. I'm honored, man. I'm very honored. Mohammed, buenas tardes.
It's
great to be with you, man.
You too, my brother. Tell me a little bit about what you do, Pipo, and what brought you to love the world of nature.
Wow. I'm going to start with that second question.
There you go.
We're going right into it, huh?
0 to 100, brother. You know this.
Is there any other way?
There's no other way, man.
Well, I think it's a recognition that there is no nature, really. There is nothing apart from you. It's all one, right? We're all one when you go deep into it. Even if you look from it spiritually, our life depends on the planet's health, on our community health, on how other people are doing. And if anything, COVID has shown us that's so true. You know, you can have the best life, you can do everything properly, but if we don't take care of each other, and for example, elderly people now, then it doesn't work. The system collapses, and we are part of the system. So it's recognizing that we're all connected. But on a deeper level, I was reflecting on this the other day, is that I think the moments where I felt the most joy and where that joy has come from that connection have been moments of deep experiences with nature. And I'm happy to report that many of those experiences have been with you at some point in all our travels together over the year. By the way, I've known this guy for what now? 10 years? More maybe? So
2008.
Yeah, so we've had our share. We've had our share of adventures, and a lot of those adventures, I think we've both been searching for those experiences. And then, if that's something that gives us so much joy, where we feel just grateful to be there, to be alive, to be present, then that's something that we should be taking care of. We should be taking care of our home, and that's kind of where that comes from initially. And the first question about what I do, well, I started a company in 2016 called SINBA, not because we think we're the Lion King, but because we dream of a world sin basura. Sin basura, by the way, we're located in Peru, in Lima, so a little far away from most of you probably at this point. But sin basura means without trash, and it's pretty simple concept. When we think about complex environmental issues, usually one of the first ones, and one of the ones we have the most direct and immediate connection to, we all generate waste every day, and we should be making an effort that waste doesn't go to waste and actually gets used. Obviously, we have to minimize waste. It's estimated that 30% of the waste we generate could have been avoided by our decisions. So we have to start from there. But then the unavoidable waste should not go to waste. We should be using that as a raw material in a circular economy. And that's kind of what SINBA is about. We create solutions for businesses. We're actually moving into the residential space as well, to manage their waste more sustainably in a circular way. And specifically, we've been known in Peru for the work we do with organic waste. So organic waste is more than half of what we generate. It's in Peru, it's about 55% of all waste is organic. Organic waste is 100% recyclable. Throw a banana peel in a forest and see what happens. It'll disappear in a matter of weeks, because the nature gives us all the tools we need to be able to recycle those nutrients and those building blocks of nature. It's all there. We just need to harness it and put it to use. And we need to imitate nature's cycles in how we design our systems, our cities, our neighborhoods, and we have to learn from nature in that. You know, nature doesn't generate landfills. That's us doing that. And so that's kind of where we get our inspiration. And today in Peru, it is estimated that 0.1% of all organic waste gets recycled. So we're actively moving to turn that on its head. We have the first biofactory, which is a plant that can recycle 100% of organic waste. And so we're doing that for our customers. And by doing that and also helping them manage other forms of waste more sustainably, we're able to reduce waste to landfill by up to 95%. And most companies in Peru don't even get to 10% today. So that's a pretty big change. And what we're trying to do is create these little pockets of change that can then grow, because we're still kind of, I would say, moving from the startup phase to actually being a real company with a bigger organization. We like to think of ourselves as a startup still, because we know that there's still so much innovation to be done, and we like to keep the mindset. But I would say we're a social venture in the company stage, and hoping to grow and hoping to inspire others to do this work, because waste management is not a sexy space. It's not a space a lot of people go into to innovate. I don't think many college grads, get their degree and say, "Ooh, I'm going to go manage some trash." So, hopefully you
guys are just fancy trashmen, pretty much. I mean,
yes, basically. And hopefully we can change that. I think part of what we're trying to do is really just inspire. And I think this is an opportunity. I'm grateful for this opportunity to keep doing that, because I think there's so much work to be done, and the opportunities are endless. We did a little study on the market potential for waste management in Peru. If we managed waste in a circular way, we estimated the market to be $3 billion a year. Oh. Now, Peru is not a rich or big country, so a $3 billion market is incredible, and not many people are seeing that opportunity. And in Peru, we generate about a third of waste per capita that you generate in the U.S. So, in the US, there are more established players, but still, it's a huge opportunity.
Certainly. People, every time I talk to you, man, I get super inspired. It seems like just right off the bat, you hit us with so much truth, so much passion, so much knowledge. And it's definitely one of the key factors and one of the reasons why I was so attracted to this friendship from day one. Was really around the outlook that you have on life. I just want our listeners to get an understanding of how diverse you are. So can you walk me through like the first, 15 years of your life, where you were born, where your parents are from, how you guys migrated to Peru, so on and so forth?
Sure. It's kind of complicated. That's actually it's always funny when people, so where are you from? And then that's like, okay, how much time do you have? But we have time, so that's good. So basically, my parents, my mom is German and my dad is of Swiss descent, born in Peru, and my parents met in Peru. And then they got married and moved to Europe. And I was born in Madrid in Spain. Lived in Spain till I was 6. Then we moved to Berlin, Germany, where we lived for 4 years. And then when I was 10 years old, we moved my parents back to Peru. For me, it was the first time. And so I lived here basically all through, middle school, high school. And here I was actually a golfer. And so the only way for me to continue playing golf, I used to play for the Peruvian national team and would, travel and represent the country in tournaments. Study was basically going to the US, because people in the States don't really know, but the US is basically the only country that promotes college athletics in the way that it does. And so in other countries, if you play in competitive sports, then you either don't go to college or you have to quit your sport to go to college. And so the way for me to keep up my game and also competitively and also be able to study and that was kind of aspirational for all of us at the time being teenager was let's try to get a scholarship in the US to keep playing sport. And so that's exactly what happened. And that's where I met Mohammed at the University of Tulsa, where we both attended in the business school and through kind of mutual friends. So that's also somewhat where my American accent comes from. I'm actually not an American citizen. After college, I had several options to see what to do, and I decided to move back to Peru. I think driven by a sense of opportunity, of necessity. The country needs a lot of things that other countries already have, and that's an opportunity for an entrepreneur. And I've always thought myself, even though I did work in bigger companies in the beginning, I always had this drive to do something, to build something, and to become an entrepreneur. So that's kind of almost the shortest way to summarize.
We got time, so not enough time to swim with the fishies, but we'll get there. One of the things that I remember was your dilemma of continuing to play golf after college because of the tax that the golf industry has on the natural environment, the natural resources. Walk me through that thought process and how difficult it was to put the club down.
It wasn't very difficult because I wasn't very good anymore after college. So that helped. Once you've played competitively and you're not able to keep up your level, it's of course you can do it for fun, but there's something there inside you that still kind of knows that you can perform at a much higher level. So I guess that helped also. The environmental factor definitely kind of plays a role, because I do think now, seeing it from an ecological perspective, and even learning more, when I played golf, I didn't know, but learning more how there are almost no golf courses that don't use, large amounts of, chemical fertilizers and pesticides and stuff. So it's, even though it's green and there's grass, that doesn't mean necessarily it's ecological. It's environmentally friendly. So that definitely plays into it a little bit. And also the fact that, coming back from the US, I think in the US golf is somewhat, an elite sport, but it's not as much as in a country like Peru. In Peru, there are really big social inequalities, and golf is not accessible to 98% of the population, 99 maybe. So just being in an environment that's so much of a bubble socially, at some point when you come to the realization and you realize some of the attitudes, towards the rest of society in those circles, it just at some point I just felt maybe I didn't belong that much as I thought anymore. Because when it was about the sport, it's one thing, and that's definitely in high school it was a great activity. Just in a country like Lima is a city of 10 million. Just to have the opportunity to be outdoors most of the day and be out, between, even though it's not eco-friendly, but in the grass, between trees, out in the sunlight. Lima is a place that doesn't have many natural spaces. So that was, and also, being out and hanging out with your friends all day when you're in school is always attractive. But, after college, I just felt like, and even during college, I felt like my calling was going in a different direction. I was very much involved in my schoolwork. I enjoyed my classes. I did some political science classes that I was, very drawn to. And so I just felt like I was going in a different direction. And I was very much at peace with that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I remember that throughout my short-lived career in oil and gas, you knew something that I didn't know. And you constantly kind of poked the bear, constantly poked at me, and you would ask me these generative questions like, so, you sure you want to continue doing this line of work? And it never seemed like you were talking down to me or, necessarily criticizing me for the work that I was involved in. But it always seemed like you knew deep down that the work that I was doing was not in alignment with who I was as a person. And I'm just kind of curious as to, what was it that led you to believe that? Was it an intuition? Was it that you just knew me well enough that you saw that disalignment in my life and you wanted me to figure it out on my own? I have, I owe a lot to my current journey to you in terms of my realization and my awakening moment that what I was doing and the work that I was involved with was definitely not in alignment with who I was as a person. And I just kind of have to ask you, like, how did you know, or what made you, ask those questions? Mike is yours.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of context to anybody listening, by the time this was going on, since high school almost, I'd been very much kind of had a personal interest in climate change and environmental issues. So I was kind of steeped in that, and my dad taught sustainability courses at an architecture school here in Peru. So I kind of had that in the family as well. So it's kind of always been my position, but I'd never really been actively doing anything about it. It's just one of those issues where I'm interested and I know about it, but I wasn't really, if I look back on even my college years, I would have used those years differently had I known then what I know now, and how just the fact of doing something about it. And so, I think it's important that in the face of a situation like, you were working in the oil and gas industry, I obviously had I don't want to say a judgment about it, but I had, my thoughts on it and my opinions on it. But I think it's important exactly to not judge. I think the people that are doing the work and it's impossible to state today that oil and gas and energy in general is not a very important activity for all of us in a sense. All of life as we know it and the economy as we know it is driven by most of that, which is what we have to change, right? And so I think it's what are we working towards is a little bit where I was seeing myself going, and then also what we work towards is where the industries and where the opportunities of the future are. And I think we were both kind of simultaneously exploring that, because I had a corporate job that had no real purpose, environmental or other, for a while. Also, I was working in a big construction company that even had some questionable practices itself. And so it was not my position to judge, but I think we were kind of mutually driving ourselves, mutually maybe poking ourselves to look beyond kind of the career paths or the business as usual scenarios that we were looking at for our lives. I remember, we were exploring about social impact courses, and then you ended up taking it at the University of Pennsylvania, and then kind of getting that feedback on, hey, what'd you learn? Like, I want to know as well. So I think it was a mutual process. I think, and I think it all just started aligning in a way that well, it's led us to where we are now, and who knows where it's going to lead us moving forward. But I think that, and this is going to sound like a really millennial thing to say, probably. I do think I'm still in that age category, and you are too, probably. So it's today it's not good enough to do well. I think we need to do well and do good, right? I love that phrase, and I think that I'm very much drawn to the concept of the B corporations, which is kind of a certification of social and environmental impact for companies that is looking to, how you do business is really important, and what your business's purpose is really important, and to put that into the equation when we design and develop a business, a company, a venture, entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it, is kind of the way to go. And so I think that's a little bit what's lacking in a lot of industries, and we were both living it. So I think that kind of we shared that process of transformation. So I don't know if I had a clear vision. I just knew that we kind of had to push each other to go somewhere else.
I really love how you mentioned, and acknowledged the fact that, oil and gas and these industries, they got us to where we are, but we have to change where we're going. And I think so many people get caught up in the it brought us to where we are, and they forget about where we're going piece of it, right? They just kind of stop there. And it's like, no, I mean, I acknowledge that. Like, I'm not saying that oil and gas needs to, expire or be phased out overnight. Like, that would be detrimental to the human, population, although it may be more beneficial to nature. But the idea is, yes, we acknowledge what it's done and how it's, modernized the world and brought us to the day and age that we're currently living in. But we're also, understanding that in order to be sustainable moving forward, we have to have a different outlook on life, a different outlook on power, housing, waste, transportation, water, so on and so forth. So I want to share a little story with our listeners about the road trip that you and I took back in 2015. It was when I was going through that social impact strategy program that you mentioned. And we actually road tripped from Dallas to Phoenix, Arizona and back. And, that was a pretty incredible eye-opening experience for me and I imagine you. And I'm actually going to have Vince on my podcast, coming up on the next podcast. So I'll be sure to bring this story up. But I want you to recall that trip, share with our listeners some of the experiences that we had, some of the places that we saw, some of the enlightenments that I would think both of us really that came to fruition during that trip. What stands out to you the most? What do you remember about that trip, whether it's the sights or the feelings, the views, so on and so forth?
Well, just to give a little more of the history, Mo here was always like every 3 months he was like, where's our next trip gonna be? Like, we need to plan a trip. Let's plan a trip all the time. Like, and I loved it. Like, I was always down. Now we both have families and stuff, so it gets a little bit harder with time. But at that point, we were both just like ready to go. If we could pack up and leave tomorrow, then we were sure to do it. And I think you'd been reading about solar energy. You'd been pretty interested in the topic as something that was coming up big, that had a big future. And you found this event, the Solar Summit, right, in Phoenix. And we were just talking about, oh, this looks really cool. Like, we should try to go. I think we emailed them saying like, oh, we're students. It's give us the discount or something, because we didn't have everything it took for the full pass or whatever. And we were just like, all right, we just need to get there. We'll see what happens. We'll just say, we're starting a business, something, and we have to go learn and start diving into this solar ecosystem. So obviously that's something that still sounds great at the time, obviously as well. So we took that road trip in a gas-powered car, I have to mention, to the oil and gas industry experts out there. We went out there, and it was just amazing to see, I think, a part of the U.S. that probably gets overlooked first. Like, that was a big part of it. All the canyons, Utah, the canyons in Arizona, Grand Canyon, obviously, all these places going through Colorado, places that I think, except for Grand Canyon probably, that are really amazing just to be able to have that opportunity to go there. And that goes back to kind of the first point, all these images come back to my head of just being so connected to these amazing places. Another impression, obviously, I don't know if I should tell the story, but what the heck. We had a place to sleep, but it was pretty far away. So we decided, we had a tent with us, the mansion. It was a tiny tent for two guys to be sleeping in. But anyway, the mansion, of course. So the event, the Solar Summit, was happening on a resort that had a golf course. And so after kind of the cocktail party or whatever, we were too tired to drive all the way back. So we decided to set up the mansion on the golf course. And I remember waking up around 4 a.m. with the sprinklers just hitting the side of the tent. because they were watering the golf course. So that's just how we roll, I guess.
We were so
but
proud of ourselves. We were going around like we're the greenest people out here, right?
yeah.
Everyone else is burning carbon in their 5-star villas, right? Pumping their ACs, and here we are, camping out on the golf course.
Yeah, and actually Vince then gave us a home for well, he gave us a yard to put our tent in for the next night. But I mean, I think it's just to have that time, to have that space, to give ourselves that space to reflect, to talk about, and having a friend to go through the process with. We were going through, I think, very similar processes, and to just kind of do this while driving and walking and hiking through these most incredible places was definitely a highlight that I remember a lot. And the conversations in general of the whole trip, I think it was maybe 10 days, 12 days, something like that. And it's a big privilege, just to have those experiences to look back on, and in a sense, looking back on it at the time, we were just kind of winging it, right? Like we usually do. But looking back on it, I think it's like we kind of knew that we were doing something important, maybe not for the world at the time, but for us, for our lives. Important in a different way that you wouldn't think is important, in a traditional. We weren't doing any big deeds or anything like that, but it was just kind of I think taking moments to enjoy life and to really be able to just soak it all in, the experiences, is just something that's so important, and we're pretty good at that. We are still, I think, but we were definitely pros back at the day.
I think one of the most important takeaways from just reminiscing on these memories and these experiences are how important it is to find someone who's going through a similar journey as you, right? Because it would have never felt the same, been the same, resonated the same way, had the same level of impact like it did, knowing that both of us were sort of in alignment from a mindset perspective and a perspective on just life, and developing sort of a lifestyle for ourselves that was more harmonious with nature, more harmonious with our outlook on the world and the future. And I know that the cap was at White Sands. When we were at White Sands that evening, and we camped out there for the night, and we were looking over the sand dunes, and on one side, there was the beaming glow of just this radiation like feel of the city's pulse and the electricity grid, right? That's all this artificial power, right, that's being generated. And then we're looking over to the other side of the sand dune, and it's illuminated by the stars and the moon and the shooting stars. And we were sitting there, and we were just like, look at the difference between the man-made grid and the natural grid. And I think we both had that like awakening moment, that epiphany that was like, we want to be part of the natural grid, right? We want to be a part of a future that is more dependent and one with nature than one that's more dependent on the invention of man. And I really believe that moment in our life was so much more powerful because we were both on similar journeys. We were both in alignment in terms of what we wanted from life. We were both kind of in tune with our intuition and knowing that we were entrepreneurs deep down inside, that there were great things ahead of us that we were going to accomplish, even if we didn't really know at the time what they were. And if we're still on that journey today, right, which I still believe that we are, but it really goes to show that, if you're an entrepreneur and you're struggling or you're having a hard time getting your idea off the ground, or getting the idea completely flushed out and distilling your vision, one of the most powerful things that you can do is, teaming up or being around similar like-minded entrepreneurs that are maybe in the same stage in the process as you are. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you have to find, there's an African saying that it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a community, it takes an ecosystem to raise a startup, and the startup has to go beyond the founder eventually. And so it has to have, strong roots, and the roots are in kind of everybody that's around. So, if you are around friends and coworkers and family that every time you pitch them your idea are like, oh, get a real job. Like, what are you talking about? What, that's not going to work. Then that's probably not going to water your startup plant really well. I think you have to find an ecosystem that gives you ideas, that helps you be more creative, that helps you kind of drive and supports you, because being an entrepreneur is not the easy path. There are easier paths than becoming an entrepreneur, for sure. And so don't make it harder on yourself than it already is, I think is an important takeaway.
Definitely, that support system is so critical. Having people around you that believe in what you're doing, believe in themselves, and want to see you succeed. There's a couple of other items, a couple of other points that I was thinking through as you were talking. One of them is just, what is it that drives you to be an entrepreneur? What are some of the things that, although there are easy road, there is an easier way out, like you were mentioning. What is it that makes you, keep coming back? Why do you keep coming back for more?
There's two things. One is that I've seen kind of the other side. I worked that corporate job, and I've seen how that life is, and it doesn't have to be bad. I think there are a lot of companies doing amazing work, and that very happily. But in the end, you come in and you're a cog in a big wheel, and then you can make changes, obviously, but it's a different energy. It's a different kind of momentum that allows you to or not express your creativity, depending on where you are. And for me, the experience was a clear takeaway of who I didn't want to be and how I didn't want to spend my time. Because in the end, when you think about work, like, work is basically today the number one place where you spend your time and energy. Like, this is where you're committing your life energy, which is like the most valuable and precious thing you have. How are you investing that? What are you committing it to? What are you accomplishing with that energy? And so just having the clear example of what I didn't want was very powerful, because then, I wasn't very clear at that time what I did want, but I knew what I didn't want, right? And so from there I could build. And the other thing is that, I think it's an expression of self as well. I think it's like, man, when I worked in that company, I was like, oh, I wish we could do this, or I wish we could, organize ourselves like this, or I wish I could choose the people that I am around all day. And in a big company, you go and you have your coworkers. You didn't really choose. Yeah, you chose to be but you didn't really choose the people that are there, and you just kind of, and all our life, it's kind of like that. You go to school, and the people that are there are the ones that are there, and just being able to make those decisions and to express those ideas and to make them happen pretty quickly, because in a startup you can make changes and implement things usually pretty quickly, was just something that I think is really powerful. Is really powerful. And then kind of to be able to join, having an impact, which is something that I value, like in terms of, I want to contribute to the world. I want to, there's a good question to ask, is like, if you're really, really successful in what you're doing, really like highly, like globally successful, is the world going to end up being a better place or not? You know, if you sell sugary sweets and you're like super successful and everyone is eating, you know, a pound of candy every day and buying your product, is the world going to be a bit better place or not? And if you can't answer that question clearly in what you're doing, then maybe reconsider what you're doing. So to be able to build from there is a powerful force. And then, you know, to be able to turn that into an opportunity to, you know, to do well in life and to have abundance in life, and to be able to use that abundance to help more eventually down the line, then why not? Sounds like a good way to invest kind of, you know, our the years where we're going to have the most energy, where we're going to have the most passion, where we're going to have the most time. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
I love it, man. That's really, really powerful. I think the self-expression, I mean, that's so true. I loved how you mentioned, you know, for all the entrepreneurs struggling with what they want to do, you know, why don't you start out with what you don't want to do, right?
Yeah.
And use that process of elimination to say, well, I don't want to be involved in the fast food industry. I don't want to be involved in the chemical and fertilizer industry. I don't want to be involved in the pharmaceutical industry. I don't want to be involved in the oil and gas industry, you know, and maybe narrow it down to find the industries that you believe are, you know, socially impactful, you know, are dedicated to environmental justice, right? Are ones that are making the world a better place without any sort of, you know, consideration, right? Without any sort of like, well, am I making the world a better place? Well, if you have to ask yourself that question, more than likely, you know, there's a reason why you have that doubt in your mind, right? So that's really, really awesome, man. Really great feedback. Is there anything that you feel like you want our listeners, your listeners, to know in terms of your story? I mean, one thing that I think I'm still a little bit, I want you to break down is walk me through SINBA's process, start to finish. So you guys go to restaurants currently and supermarkets, and hopefully in the future residential outlets. And before I steal your thunder, I'm going to stop there and let you kind of walk me through your process before I completely destroy it.
No problem. You were doing okay. I wanted to hear you say it, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, I can give it a shot.
No, I got it. I got you. I don't want you to mess it up. No, I'm just kidding. There's actually been a few changes. So basically, what we're trying to do is we're innovating in the waste management field, which, like I said, is not a field that is getting a lot of innovation, or not enough at all. And what we're doing is we're creating the Sema Cycle, right? So what we call the Sema Cycle is, how do we turn a linear process, which is, you know, we use stuff, we toss it out, and then in Peru, whatever you toss out, there's a 96% chance that it's going to go end up in a dumpster or in a landfill, right? So it's going to go somewhere and become pollution. So how do we kind of take this linear process, and how do we bend it into a curve so that it becomes a circular economy? And we do that basically by harnessing collaboration, and by working with actors that are already doing work in this field, and by finding the ones that want to do something and putting them into the Sema Cycle. So right now we work with businesses and homes, and businesses can be of many fields. So that we do work with restaurants, but we work with schools, we work with hotels, we work with industry, we work with, you know, big dining halls, cafeterias, anywhere that generates a lot of organic waste, basically. We have focused on organic waste because that's where we add kind of this innovative solution of the biofactory that I mentioned earlier. We help them the first step is that no waste management solution is going to work unless the internal management at the place that you're trying to work with is done properly. So basically, waste segregation is key. And for that, you need two things. You need containers, and you need to train people. So we do all of that. So we provide really a 360-degree solution. We provide the containers, we provide the bags, we provide the training. We then pick up the organic and recyclable waste. So the stuff that's not going to go to landfill is what we pick up, which is usually around 90% of the waste generated. The organic waste goes to the biofactory, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But the inorganic waste, so all what you would think of when you think of recycling, so cardboard, paper, plastics, glass, metals, go to recycler associations that we work with. So recycling in places like Peru is an activity done by people that don't have a job, and it's a survival activity. So people will basically go out into the streets at night, find trash, dig through the trash, and find materials that are valuable to them to sell them the next morning so they can have something to eat the next day. So it's really a day-to-day and a survival activity, and it's all being done informally, right? It's not a real job. It's just an activity that people do to make a little bit of money. And so the idea is to work with these recyclers in the pickup, all the logistical side. So we formalize them. We help them start a small business. They become our logistical providers. So that's a big transformation on the social side. And they get access to all these materials, all these recyclable materials, which they're absolute experts at, right? And so they're the ones recycling those, and we're the ones recycling the organic waste. The organic waste gets processed into animal feed, which we then take to local farms to be used, and then they produce food, which then gets obviously sold back to the market. And so we're taking these tons and tons of materials that are today becoming pollution, recycling the materials, recycling the nutrients in the case of the organic waste, to be able to produce food that then goes back to us. And what that does is not only avoid the pollution from landfilling and dumpsters, but also create a much more resilient and secure food economy, because we're not using any external inputs. We're using the inputs that we have available locally to produce food, and then obviously that's going to make a much more resilient system than, for example, importing soy from the US, from Brazil, or whatever they're using today to feed these animals. And so it's putting it to the best possible use, and using it to create a local economy with all the actors that are already in the community doing this work.
Pipo, this when I hear you explain this, it just seems like such a no-brainer. But I know that you've struggled, a lot with getting the SINBA up and running, and marketing it, across all the different businesses, the supermarkets. What are your biggest obstacles in today's day and age? Is it industry, or is it awareness and education? Walk us through that.
Yeah, it's hard as a business model, and I think that's why there aren't any big companies in this space yet in Peru. Is as a business model, we compete with either these informal recyclers that go out into the streets and pick up the waste and just kind of take what they want, and like the homes don't even have to separate, or they don't even know what's going on. So we compete against a solution that's completely informal, completely leaves the people vulnerable. So socially, it's not a good option at all, but it's free in the end. So they don't charge for that service. Mm-hmm. They don't even give a service. They just go and pick it up. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, we compete against the municipal, waste management service that's hired, government contracted, and all they do is take it to landfill, right? And so that's included in your taxes. So basically, if you're a home that wants to hire SINBA, our subscription program is the equivalent of about $20 a month, which is something that's affordable. But in Peru, it's still more money than it would be in the States. But it's $20 that you don't necessarily have to pay, because you have the other option to just send everything to landfill. So that's a big obstacle. And in the end, what the government is doing, and this is kind of one of the things that we're kind of looking at, how can we help change this, is that the government, through the taxes of the country, is subsidizing these waste management companies by up to 75%. So if we're wanting to come in with a self-sustainable solution as a startup, we're competing against a 75% subsidy. So that's really hard to compete against, right? If we had the same subsidy, obviously it would be a lot easier for us, but we don't. So we're trying to do it despite the government and the public incentives against a solution like ours joining. And the other thing is that it's hard to get people, one, to understand why this is necessary, because people usually don't think about where our waste goes. It goes away, and that's all we care about. If it's not, if it's not in my backyard, then it's not no longer my problem. It's someone else's problem. And that's the mindset that we have to change. We have to open people's eyes to that. Hey, by the way, every time you throw something out on the street and the truck comes by, it's going to a landfill, and the landfill is this. Because people aren't even aware what that means. It basically means we're digging your trash a little farther down the road in nature, right, in a hole. And that's a highly polluting solution. It's not even a real solution. It's just kind of, let's just sweep it under the rug a little farther down the road.
Yeah, deal with it later.
Well, and later is, let our kids and our grandkids and the next generations deal with all the trash that we left on the planet.
Right.
And there's so much, and it's happening so informally that in Peru, actually only 35% of waste gets landfilled. The other, and I mentioned that only 4% actually gets recycled. So the big gap in the middle is basically ending up somewhere that we don't know, which means it's in the rivers, it's in the ocean, it's scattered across the landscape, it's being burned, which creates high amounts of toxic fumes that we all breathe because the air is one. And so, until we will all kind of have a bigger awareness about the problem that we're creating, then we won't have as many incentives to change or to invest in a solution that allows me to change. So those are I think, the two big obstacles. And and we're working on both those really well. But I think the other big obstacle is that operationally it's complex, right? We're doing a lot of work. We're training people, we're designing solutions internal, we're designing kind of solutions in the companies with bins and all that. We're distributing products, we're having daily pickup routes of waste for all our clients. So that's running like a really complex logistical system. We have a factory, we have a plant, and then we have to sell both the service and the products that we then come out with, which is the animal feed. And so those are a lot of activities for one company to do, right? And so but having that integration is what makes us different. And so running all that, doing that with innovation, because the biofactory is not something that you go to Home Depot and buy, right? This is something that doesn't exist in Peru. There's no engineer that you call and say, set me up a factory like the one that my neighbor has. No one's done it here. So we're basically creating it from literature and from trial and error. And so our next challenge is, how do we do this at really an industrial scale, right? How do we scale? Before the pandemic, we were doing about 6 tons per day. How do we scale this to 100 tons per day? Because Lima alone generates 10,000 tons of waste every day, 10,000 tons. So if we're solving 6 tons, we're just scraping. We're not even tickling the problem. We need to really scale, and even 100 tons is 1%, right? And 100 tons is a lot of throughput. It's a lot of material to manage, right? And that's 1% of a lot of what?
A lot of banana peels.
That's a lot of banana peels. Well, we are 10 million, and then once we do that, how do we replicate it elsewhere? Because if you look across Latin America or even the U.S., there aren't many places that have good solutions to this problem. So there's a lot to do still.
I don't want to freak out the listeners, but how big of a problem or issue can landfills, become? I mean, we don't really think about it very often. I know, up here where I live in Texas, every time I just think of the concept of a landfill, I'm just like, I just want to turn a blind eye and pretend like they don't exist. And it probably is the same way for the majority of people out there, where they want to turn their cheek the other way and think that, hey, it's okay if my waste, I'll just throw it in the bin, right? And then the bin gets taken off to wherever it
It
goes.
goes away.
La,
It
la,
goes
la.
away.
Just
Where's away? No, it's away. It's away. Where is that?
away.
Well, it's away.
Exactly.
It's gone. Yeah.
I mean, have you read it, any studies or anything? Or, I mean, can you just put into perspective? Or you kind of did with the fact that, you're only doing 6 tons and there's 100,000 tons on a daily basis.
10,000. Yeah.
10,000.
Yeah, every day.
So,
well, the landfill, it's interesting because it's one of those things that is kind of, it's a hard concept to grasp for human psychology. And I do think the best way to do this would be everybody in their life has to go at least once and just stand by a landfill for 1 hour and just watch the trucks arriving and just throwing it all in and just have that experience to realize, to smell it, because you can imagine how a landfill smells, right?
mm-hmm.
Once you've smelled a landfill and then that smell becomes impregnated in your clothes, and then you go back home and your clothes smell like landfill, and you've seen that, it's a life-changing experience that everyone should have, should be mandatory,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just like you do, I don't know, fire drills or whatever, everyone should have to go at least once.
I like
to see
that.
this, because we're all part of it. We all generate, this is one of those problems that if I tell you that, let's fix climate change, you say, oh my God, that's so complex, emissions that I can't see, and then the climate changing in a way that I don't even understand. It's such a complex system. Obviously, I'm not saying it's not important, but when we're talking about waste, these are physical items that I hold in my hand and I personally throw into the bin every day. There's not a single day of your life that you have not generated waste. If you've eaten, you've generated waste. If you've used paper, you've probably generated waste. And so it's just something that's so much part of our daily routines, but we're so unaware of the impact that's happening down the road. So I think making it visible is super important. Education is super important. And then, if we visited it, or at least, nowadays, we don't really have to get all the adults to visit it. We just need to get all the kids to visit it, and then they'll go home and say, Daddy, we need to do, we can't keep doing this. Like, are you not recycling? Today it's the kids that are teaching the adults, right? So maybe that's one way to hack the system and get there more quickly.
I love that.
And then, I just think that it really is that connecting us with what is actually happening. Mm-hmm. and asking those questions, when we buy something, and once you actually know what gets recycled and what doesn't, and then next time you're at the supermarket and you're buying that product and you say, oh, I'm not going to buy this because I know that this is going to go to landfill. So it changes your whole decision-making process. It makes you a more responsible buyer. It makes you, it's very interesting. It's a complex issue. I do want to plug a book that I'm listening to. It's called A Waste-Free World. It's written by Ron Gona. It's available on Amazon, and I'm listening to it on Audible. And he goes through how our economy was engineered, and especially the U.S. economy, it's because he lives in the U.S., engineered for a throwaway economy. Mm-hmm. So we've been, this was on purpose. Like, people thought about how do we get, in the name of progress, because especially in the 50s and 60s, there wasn't that much awareness about our impacts. Mm-hmm. So how do we get people to throw more things away so that they buy more, and so we can grow our economy, which obviously is, let's grow our economy by destroying our ecology is not a very good long-term solution, right? And that's where we're backtracking. But just to give you one example of how this plays out, the light bulb, the first commercial light bulb that was ever made was made in 1903, and it still works to this day. It's in California in a fire station, and it's on 24 hours a day, 120 almost years later. But what happened? All the light bulb manufacturers got together and said, if we're going to make our light bulbs this well built, then we're going to not sell a lot of light bulbs. So they all agreed to not make light bulbs that last longer than 1,000 hours. And they got a lab to test it. And so the companies inside this cartel, global cartel, the biggest corporations that make light bulbs, GE, Philips, all those, got together and actually agreed that they were going to make disposable light bulbs because they needed to sell more. How many tons of materials, of glass, of steel, of etc., could have been saved if that had not happened, right? Mm-hmm. So this is not something that is unavoidable. This is something that's been designed this way. And so I think for entrepreneurs, well, how do we design our way out of this, right? And that's what a lot of companies are doing. And Philips is an example today of wanting to do things differently because they recognize that that was not the way to move forward. But in a lot of senses, we've kind of been accustomed that this is the normal way to do it, that we just have so many throwaway items. But it's been designed, and so we need to design our way out of it as well.
You touched on this once or twice, Pipo, but what are some things that our listeners, people at home, can be doing to lower their waste besides visiting a landfill and getting real stanky for an hour? And also getting that mindfulness around their purchasing decisions. What are some other things that you and I and others could be doing to live in more of a waste-free world?
I always talk about 3 principles, and I didn't make these up, but it's pretty simple when you just think of 3 things that you can be doing. And the number 1 thing is reduce waste to a minimum. Like I said earlier, 30% of what we throw out could have been avoided, right? A lot of food waste, a lot of things going to waste in our fridges, etc. Hey, maybe I could have frozen it. Hey, maybe I didn't need to buy that 10th avocado. Maybe I could have, I can buy a little more often, a little less, and have fresher food. Maybe I can, freeze, whatever. So there's a lot of ways to reduce our waste. Take our reusable bags, and even when we buy a product, like, ask yourself the question: do I really need this? Do I really need this? Is this an important item for my life? So much of the shopping that we do is just impulsive. I saw an ad for that, and now I want it, and then you buy it, and then a week later you don't even remember you got it, and then it ends up somewhere in your house as waste, right? And so, or being thrown out. So just being honest about, do I really need this? Or maybe if I throw something out, can I repair this? Can I donate it? Right? Can it be put to use somewhere else? So reducing waste is the number 1 principle. The second principle is, separating your waste. And this is something that in the States is pretty normal, but actually doing it and informing yourself on what is really recyclable and what isn't, because a lot of people think a lot of things are, there's actually a word for it. It's called aspirational recycling, which is you throw a bunch of stuff in the recycling bin, hoping that it's going to get recycled, but you really don't know. You're really not sure if it actually does get recycled. But just in case, you put it in the recycling bin. And that's actually really harmful.
Makes you feel better about yourself.
Makes you feel better about yourself. Right.
Yeah.
But actually what it's doing is it's hurting the company that's managing your recycling, because now it ends up, the average contamination rate of recycling streams is 25%, right? So 25% of the items that a recycling company is receiving is actually not recyclable material. So informing yourself and really being aware of how you're segregating your waste, what you're putting in what bin, seems like such a simple and easy thing to do, but it makes you, it gives you awareness. It makes you conscious about what's going to happen with that afterwards. And once you realize everything you're not putting into the recycling bin is actually going to the landfill, it makes you think twice. And then if we all do that, that puts a lot of pressure on companies to actually start making their packaging much more recyclable, so that creates a wave of change as well. Because if I don't buy your product because it's not in a recyclable container or packaging, then at some point the company is going to say, hey, I'm losing clients because of this. Maybe I should rethink my strategy, right? And then the third thing is, once you've separated, make sure that you are actually recycling, composting, whatever it is you have at hand that you can do. So if you can compost yourself. If you can hire a company that composts, or you have a municipal composting service, join that. If you have a recycling facility, or if you have a drop-off point that's accessible to you, well, do that. And once you start doing that, what you realize is that bin that you put out that goes to the landfill gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Before all this, when I was just a an average citizen, I would take out, every 1 or 2 days, I would take out a sizable bag of waste out to the street to be picked up by the municipal waste service. Now, maybe it's every 15 days for me. Mm. So that's really the indicator where you can see your impact every day. Like if you can measure that and say, wow, I used to take my bin out every 2 or 3 days. Now it's, once a month. That's a big change, right? And that's where it becomes visible in the end.
Awesome, Pipo. That's some really, really good feedback, some really good tips and best practices. I'm definitely going to be very mindful of reusing my reusing bags, thinking to myself, is this really needed? So on and so forth. We need to do a better job all the way around of separating our waste. Aspirational recycling, definitely think that that's a super real thing out here, probably all over the world, but definitely here in America. It's been an absolute pleasure, man. I know we can keep going on and on, but I know we booked an hour for this, so we're a little bit over. But I really appreciate your time, your insight, your knowledge, your passion, your drive. The impact that you're having on society, on your community, on the people that work for you. I wish SINBA nothing but the best. I wish SINBA a world free without waste, a world where everybody is dedicated to minimizing and reducing their waste and making sure that the organic waste goes through the right circular mechanisms to eventually end up as food, animal feed. Just pleasure, man. I wish you the best. And thanks again for joining us on the Thinking Green podcast. Until next time.
Gracias, mi hermano. It's a big honor to be here, and I'm going to be following the podcast. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Siempre real y sincero. Un abrazo. Mucho respeto. Admiración y un placer, mi hermano. A próxima vez.
Un fuerte abrazo. Nos vemos pronto.
Sí, chao.
Gracias.
Thank you for listening to Thinking Green with Mohammed Abdallah. This episode was brought to you by Good Faith Energy. For more information, check out goodfaitenergy.com. Make sure you subscribe, give us a review, and leave a 5-star rating. If you like this episode, share it with a friend. See you on the next episode of Thinking Green.